Hello. Hello, my name's Irene McCarran-McWilliam. I'm Professor of Interaction Design at the Royal College of Art here in London. Previous to this, I worked in Holland at Philips Electronics and with the European Commission coordinating connected community research. And I'm very interested in the outcomes of your project as a result. But one of the things that you didn't bring out, and I don't know if you came across it in your project, was that in the design of socio-technical systems, systems that support a community through technologies, such as email and so on, there is always a cost. And the cost of email and mobile phones and computers at the moment might be increased networking, but it also takes away the time for reflection. We are being pressurized into being always accessible and always communicating. And the cost of that is in the reflection time. It was one of the results of the project that I worked on. And so implicit in your diagrams is that more networking, more communication is a good thing. But I think that might be only under certain conditions and needs to be balanced with an alternative strategy. So I just wondered if this came up.
I don't think it did come up specifically, but it is certainly something that I observe on a regular basis within the business. You know, the quality, for example, of email communication that takes place is often very poor. And I think it is because people feel, well, two things, I think, really. They feel that they need to respond perhaps quickly. But I think they also feel that it's not like in the old days when you used to prepare a letter or write a memo. You used to think carefully about it. Somehow people just whiz out these emails and off they go. There's no context in them. There's misspellings. The grammar's wrong. You can't understand what the hell they're trying to say. So I think the quality of that is an issue. It's not something that came up particularly. But I think that there is... I perhaps didn't draw it out, but I think there is something that's implicit in the nature of the problem that we had, and also in the solutions, which is about the quality of relationships. We very much are looking to bring people together. We're not looking to rely on email and even telephone communication. A lot of the work that we're doing to facilitate networks and relationships is about bringing people together face to face, getting people to know each other and actually to like each other as well. So we try and do some fun things together, get them drunk, that kind of stuff, which certainly the Finns enjoy enormously, and makes them brings them out of themselves a little bit as well. And that's very important.
Yeah. I'd like to add to that. I think an important issue here, and that was something that very much came up from a lot of the interviews we did, in fact, with the Norwegians and Finns and Swedes, was initially this kind of lack of communication, because they are not used to the kind of emailing that we are used to here. They prefer face-to-face. Some of the people I interviewed, for example, will travel thousands of miles every week to go and actually meet their customers, their suppliers, face-to-face. And it was very difficult for them to move from that kind of personal interaction to one that demanded a lot more emailing. So that was definitely an issue. On a different aspect, we did provide a space for reflection. I think the two-day workshop was very much, but this was mainly for the ALD, the leadership team that took part in the process. It provided them a time for them to reflect and learn about this new business that the company had taken over and they knew very little about. What hasn't happened is to provide time for reflection for the interviewees, and I hope that we will go to that. But I agree with you entirely. The quality of interaction is paramount, and that is something we need to take very much into account. Thank you. Roland.
Michelle, I was just curious, for you personally, what was the added value of complexity science in this? I mean, what have you taken on board in terms of how is your organizational design different? Are the dynamics different, or what? Because to a certain extent, you could interpret this using different words around it as, a reorganization and integration, etc. So I'm just curious of quite specifically.
I could probably answer that with if it's here. There's a backup slide, I think, which... yeah, we used some complexity speak, if you like, as part of the workshop and at other times in the project. And we kind of, at one point, we coined the phrase of the holy grail of organization design. And this slide was trying to, use complexity language, if you like, to describe what, good features of an organizational design. And so it was good in terms of stimulating thinking around that. So what we wanted to do was have an organization that facilitates but doesn't inhibit emergence, that encourages self-organization, very, very important point, explores its space of possibilities. And we discussed these points. Eve presented and we discussed it with the project team, with the 20-odd people, to help us formulate our thoughts and our analysis and the recommendations. So I wouldn't want to sort of overstress the significance of the complexity theory in this. I think probably I would say the methodology and the tools and the techniques, and in particular the structured interviewing and the analysis that we did with the teams and the workshop were probably on balance more significant, but I wouldn't say that there was no contribution from this. This was a very useful and enlightening session that we ran, I think.
I'd like to add to that because I think Terry's emphasizing the methodology, the tools and the techniques, but the point is everything we did was it was part of the logic of complexity. If we were not working with those principles, with that logic, we would not have used that approach. We would not have used those tools and techniques. So everything, the theory was underlying everything we did, the way that we did it. And I think that is very important. And also bringing in some of the awareness without being heavy-handed. Because one of the things we found is bringing in a lot of the theory at the beginning. People go back and say, don't give me another set of another language that I can't cope with. Give me the examples, work with me in the way that I understand the business. And now, in fact, we are getting requests. Please let us know more about complexity, because now we're beginning to understand what it was that was happening, and now we want the language. It's a very, very interesting process of how this has happened. But to answer your question, everything is underpinned by the logic of complexity. Now I have two, Deborah and then Venica. Thank you.
I'm Deborah Huskin from Dancing Star Productions, and one of the things I offer is coaching. And I'm curious, when you're building relationships, as you're trying to do, are you using coaching in your organization, and what role is it taking? We
have a lot of people who have mentors, which is perhaps slightly different. One can try to define the differences between them. We have a lot of people who are being mentored throughout the organization. Typically, we try and do that with people from outside of their direct line, of course, and often it's with people from other parts of Rolls-Royce, but I don't know the number, but I would say probably, 50 or so of our people I could draw up a list of who I know to have mentors. Coaching specifically, not something that we've particularly focused on. I would guess say that we would expect the line manager, to be the coach, and the functional boss also to have a role in coaching. So, no, not something that we've specifically focused on as part of this.
Thank you. Venica?
Venica Kingsland. I work for the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, but I'm also a research student. You mentioned the customer market interface as one of the major work streams. Have you been able to apply complexity principles to the account management role? It would be interesting to hear your views on that.
Have we been able to apply complexity?
Is it
complexity principles to the account management role?
I guess the straight answer is no. We haven't. I'm not sure that we've tried to really. What we have done is, the contribution of complexity was in arriving at the outputs, and what we have now done is we've given that task, the task of sorting out the customer account management system, to one of our senior marketing people. he's not working with complexity theory, he's not working on a collaborative basis with the LSE, he's just getting on with it as a project within the business. But you know, I'm kind of overseeing the work, all of these work streams on behalf of the Marine Executive, and I suppose, you know, the way that I'm trying to guide it is probably influenced to some extent by the experience that I've had. So, for example, I'm making sure that we're not just, you know, inventing these things in an ivory tower and then going out and trying to implement them. There's lots of iteration that's going on with the business leadership and with appropriate people in the businesses as we develop our approach to customer account management and the other things that are happening.
Yes. What, in one sense, Terry has described is a kind of co-evolutionary influence. And that happens all the time, I think, through the interactions that we've had. So there is a reciprocal influence, and that reciprocal influence was also very strong when we tried to design the workshop with the ALD team when they were bringing back all the findings from the 44 interviews. There was it was never a one way. They influenced us as much as I hope we influenced them. It was a constant dialogue with together learning and finding out new things and creating new ways of thinking, new ways of working. I think this is where we keep coming back again, that this new way of working is what has emerged from this interaction, and I think this is how we can see it very much from a complexity perspective.
I've been looking at some of the work with networks, and there is a clear advantage to look at preferential relationships when it comes to account managers.
Okay, thank you.
BT Global Services. BT Global Services is the international part of BT, and there are about 17,000 of us. And we, like yourselves, work in a matrix organization that's actually at least three-dimensional, with the customer element, with the product element, which is the business units, and with the center of excellence element there. And one of our key issues in BT Global Services is the speed and the quality of our decision-making. Going through that matrix, how does that work? I wonder if you could just mention whether you've actually looked at decision-making and whether the approach you've taken, complexity-based in its fundamentals, has actually affected your decision-making processes and the quality of your decisions. Okay.
Not specifically, but I'll make some comments. I think that we are not fast at making decisions, and I think it is partly a structural thing relating to the matrix. I think it's also partly a cultural thing. It's a Rolls-Royce cultural thing. Approval levels are actually, you know, quite severe, quite strict. There's a fairly there's a very well-defined hierarchy in terms of, you know, what you can spend at this level and so on. And it takes time to work through those processes. You know, capital approval boards meet a couple of times a year. If you miss one, you've got to wait for the next one. There's all that kind of stuff, which is, in a sense, outside of the scope of what we were doing here, because it's a Rolls-Royce issue. But of course, we were always trying to push back on that and influence it and change it and develop it. But that is an issue that we face, as I guess many big organizations do. I would also say that I think that probably that there is now a widespread recognition of that as an issue within our business, and people see the way of dealing with that as through relationships, I think. And kind of, we're able to fast-track things, and we understand the system now, and we communicate better. So I think that helps the decision-making, because, I want to get this to a certain point. Who do I speak to? Okay, I'll speak to Rick, and we progress it. So I think it helps that, but it wasn't an overt part of the exercise.
Right. I'd like to take that point up as well. It was very interesting in that, again, one of the things that came up, particularly from the Nordic interviews, was the feeling that our business is a very entrepreneurial business. We need to react very quickly to a customer request. we have these incredibly imposing procedures we have to go through. Rolls-Royce has a very strong quality culture. And in order to ensure that quality, they have developed procedures that are quite heavy-handed. And they could not understand why they had to go all the way to the head office in order to take their decisions. Now, that was something that was surfaced. And when we had the meeting with the executive team, including Saul Leonardo, he's the CEO?
President, yeah.
He's the president of Marine. One of the points that was made was, do you realize that by making that imposition, you are actually affecting the innovation of the organization, because they need to react very, very quickly, and you're actually blocking it. He sat up and listened to that. He took note of it. And in fact, I think I would be very surprised if that does not actually now start to filter through, because that was something that was affecting the organization quite significantly. So there is still time to see the trickling through of the ideas. And as we all know, it takes time to trickle through the organization. I have Janos and then Peter.
Janos Kohn, academic. 2 points. One of them relates to the last diagram, that the last picture, that if you could put it back.
Sure.
Julian's picture?
Yeah, the last diagram that.
This one?
Oh yes, it's.
Yeah.
I'm a bit puzzled. It says from structure to relationship, but structure is an expression of a relationship, so it's really a kind of a tautology. Well, what you are really saying is that you are changing the emphasis from one kind of relationship to another kind of relationship. I think that would perhaps clarify the diagram a bit more. The other point is that I can see that, I don't know if I missed something, but I can see that these slides that you presented show activities like this process map triangulation, activities by yourselves and the LSE, and kind of an intervention. But what I missed, I don't know if it was there, is the statement of a problem or a group of problems that all these activities were intended to solve.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I missed it or it was there.
Okay, shall I just try and explain that? It was the expression clarify roles and responsibilities. That was the key phrase that was there. Now that expression arose from this management conference that we had in May 2002, when we spent a couple of days exploring all sorts of things about the business, and then at the end we had a facilitated session where everybody could take red sticky dots and put them up against various issues. And we used that expression, clarify roles and responsibilities, to define a group of issues that were clustered, if you like. So, and that was identified as the priority. Now, you're looking puzzled, and I think we were puzzled because we didn't really understand. And if you went out and talked to the 50 people who put a red dot against that, they would all have had a slightly different thing to say. They all had a slightly different perspective, but it was all about things to do with the matrix, with the structure, with levels of authority, with the license to operate. I've got too many bosses. I don't know who I'm supposed to talk to. All that kind of stuff. I just don't know how this organization is supposed to work, was the way that they described it. And that was part of the problem, actually, was that the number one priority was clarify roles and responsibilities, but we weren't really sure what it meant. We could express it in a whole bunch of statements in the way that I've just done it, but for simplicity we called it clarify roles and responsibilities. But it was all this, lots and lots and lots and lots of things. And I think that was why we took a while to determine what we were going to do about it. And I think it's also why the approach that we took was appropriate, because what we did was we went out and asked the people who had been there, well, what did you mean? We tried to get to the root of the issues. Now, we won't have identified all of the issues, but what we have done is we've identified a lot, and we've come out with these 12 things that we're doing in the business to make it better. And the result of that is that the 70 people who were at that conference feel really good about it. Hey, you listened, you gave us a chance to identify the priorities, you've gone away and done something, working with me, and you're now actually doing something in the business, again, working with me. And that has had a tremendous impact, and it's affected things like the trust issue. In itself, it's helped to build the relationships. It's been extremely powerful. But it was a very general, wishy-washy, vague issue that we were looking to deal with. But we had a problem. That's all I can say, really.
Well, one thing just to finish this point, I think 2 words that we have not mentioned that were absolutely key is that this was a collaborative project and that we put emphasis on co-creation. It was never imposing of what we saw as outsiders. It was, we need to do this together. We bring back to you a mirror of what we hear and see, but this is only a starting point. What happened was very much a collaborative co-creation process, and I think that's very important. Frank, do you have a very quick comment?
Quick comment in relation to
okay, because I've got a question at the back.
The quick comment was, I don't see the tautology. The structure is an architecture. What goes on within that architecture are the relationships.
Yes.
But they're not the same.
Yes. And it's a change of emphasis in one place. That's all.
What goes on
Yeah.
inside the
Exactly.
architecture.
Exactly.
And the picture shows very well.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Frank. Last question. We do need to finish in the next 2 minutes, but I will remind you that at 12:15 in room D206, we do have another session, and then we will concentrate very much on the complexity theory issues. But Terry will also be there, as well as Melissa, who was involved in the project. Yes, Peter.
Yes, Peter Corning, the Institute for the Study of Complex Systems. Actually, I have 2 brief comments. One very much related to the immediately preceding comments here about the problem of clarifying roles and responsibilities and the shift of emphasis from structure to relationships. Indeed, what this implies actually is that that your people were perceiving a need to redefine the structure because of the problems of developing adequate relationships and other problems within the organization. And it seems to me that ultimately what's required is rather than a shift of emphasis from structure to relationships, to look at the interactions between relationships and structure. And the interface between those two, because indeed some of the problems of relationships, as you described, where you've ran into structural problems in the organization when you tried to push back, or when you would try to push back
Yes.
and try to get changes made, suggests that indeed this relationship, this interaction between relationships and structure, is ultimately where you need to focus. Second point is this, and it goes back to your previous slide there, where you were talking about complexity speak. The only word that I saw missing from that list was the word synergy, which you used at several points in your talk. And indeed, what all of these other terms are related to is achieving synergies in an organization. And the reason you want to achieve synergies is because that goes to the bottom line. That's what gets you to the improved profitability. That is, as Eve and others in this room know, a very self-serving comment, because I have a new book on synergy and evolution. Thank you.
I shall make a point of reading it. Thank you. There is actually another list. That was just one list. There is another one that may have the word synergy on, but I'm not going to risk putting it up in case it doesn't. I'd just like to say one thing about. I think you're absolutely right. But in the sort of day-to-day practical world of Rolls-Royce Marine, that was the way that we chose to express it. We wanted to really focus on the relationship things. It doesn't matter where you are in the organisation. Work out who you need to talk to get the job done. kind of, in very simple terms, that was the thing. And let's not keep playing with the train set and moving the bits around to solve the problem, because that doesn't really help. But of course, you're quite right. It's an interaction.
As you say, to change emphasis, to give more emphasis to relationships.
Yes, yes.
Yes. But in fact, there was again a co-evolutionary process. Once we started that discussion, the shift in emphasis was necessary because there was too much thinking only of the structure. Once that shift took place, of course, there was the constant influence through. So it was very much the two together. Right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Terry.
Thank
Just
you.
a little token of our gratitude for a splendid presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.